Great, thanks, Dwight. So everyone, we're going to have a kind of roundtable discussion, primarily focusing on the voice of these students, as I kind of function as a host and catalyst to share their thoughts, their hopes, and their aspirations, and even more importantly, their amazing work over this past semester on 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. We'll probably talk for 25 to 30 minutes, and then we'll be able to open it up to questions. Both Alexandria and Carlos have class and work this afternoon as well. And so if there's anything that we missed today, we'll be able to, you could shoot me an email and we'll get you to continue the conversation. Dwight, thanks for that invitation. Again, my name is Dr. Matt Foss, and I teach acting and directing here in the Department of Theater and Film. I'm just finishing up. I've been here for 3.5 years now, and it's my immense privilege to introduce two of our students, Alexandria Rayford-West and Carlos Washington. They were crucial parts of our most recent production that was rehearsed, performed, and planned, and written, executed, adapted, socially distant plan. With football being canceled, we shanghaied the fancy ESPN cameras and shot this live. But that is just one part of the work and the conversation I've been so grateful to be a part of, as they've Alexandria and Carlos in the Black Theater Ensemble has been creating a collaborative model, a collaborative call to action to fight white supremacy and systemic racism in our curriculum, our pedagogy, and our theater making. This has been a conversation that we've had in many of our classes since I arrived here, when Alexandria and Carlos were some of the first students that I encountered, and they've been leaders in those conversations. So I'm so grateful to introduce them to you today. But I'll let them share a little of their story. Carlos and Alexandria, since dramaturgy is biographical and politics is personal, would you be willing to tell us a little bit about your how you came to the theater and your experiences either before Toledo or here that may lay some really helpful foundation for today's conversation? And Carlos, why don't we start with you? Would you tell us a little bit about how you got started in the theater that brought you to this conversation today, 20,000 Leagues this fall, and your work over this past summer?
Absolutely. Hi again, my name is Carlos Washington. I am a senior theater major here at the University of Toledo, and my introduction to the theater actually came my freshman year of college. I took acting for non-majors, and in that course we were required to see 2 productions from that season's roster in the theater and film department. And I believe the first production I seen was what was it? Little Shop of Horrors. And I remember seeing the giant puppet and seeing the dancing and the music, and thought, this must be what theater is. And upon seeing my second production, which was No Exit, I realized just how diverse and strange this world of theater could be. And there's something so captivating about the intimacy between performer and audience, and this unspoken trust and relation that's built in real time on stage, that I think drew me to become a theater major and begin my theatrical journey. And that's when I met Matt Foss. He was holding auditions for All Quiet on the Western Front. And he looked at me and he said, "Hey, if you're going to do this, let's go all in." And sure enough, that's what we did, and it's made me who I am today. So again, thank you for welcoming us to speak before you today, and I'll just pass it on to Alexandria if she's ready.
I'm Alexandria. I'd say since being young, I really knew I had a passion for servicing the imaginations of an audience of people, and I really wanted to pursue that with acting. And with Toledo being a bit of a mixing pot of cultures, I was really excited about getting to perform And I was told multiple times, that I'm very glad you auditioned for the role, but we're not looking for someone that looks like you. For about 2 years straight, I was told for shows, even in instances where I was the only person to show up for an audition for a character, whether it be at school or in the community, that the person that we have in mind doesn't really look like you do. And we'd be happy to have you in Ensemble, or if you'd like to help behind the scenes, that'd be great. We love the enthusiasm. And so around high school, I just kind of sat down acting, and I figured it wasn't really something I could do. I came to UT to write, and my freshman year, I took acting for non-majors, and I realized it was just an amazing opportunity to be able to be in these situations where a Black woman could play a main character. I could be helping with directing, and All Quiet was also my first show at UT. And I didn't really go in with many expectations. I knew we had a way of working in the department, but I'd also felt an obligation to audition because I was in the acting course, not because I felt like I would get a role. And I did, which was incredibly surprising. And it was very eye-opening to the world of theater, and to the ethics of our department. Just being able to play like a soldier. I was able to speak in the show, or being able to play like Ona. It was very interesting, and it really gave me a lot of confidence in being able to use my voice in performing and in creating theatrical experiences. And it was really helpful in having the confidence and the comfort in our department to say, I think that it would be really, I would like to put my vote in for the show where we speak up on social justice, and something that I think that we face a lot, not only in the world, but in theater as well, with 20,000 leads.
Great. Thanks, Carlos and Alexandria. So during your time here, last year, you and a group of fellow students created the Black Theater Ensemble. And starting an organization is always difficult. You were very careful in choosing that line ensemble as an identifier for your values. It seems to reflect our teaching learning ensemble as a department on the whole very accurately. Could you tell us a little bit about how the start of that conversation, how the Black Theater Ensemble got started, what it's aspiring to, and its values and hopes?
I know last year there was another student, and we were just talking about how there are a lot of things that we feel like are very helpful, both of us coming from backgrounds where we'd wanted to perform but weren't really given the chance because of how we looked. And we'd gotten the opportunity here at UT, but we feel like we could be doing some more. There are a lot of Black people in the department that are not really getting to work together. We're never seeing each other. We know that there are more of us here, but it can feel a little isolating, feeling like the only one. And so we felt like it would be helpful in giving us that confidence and that comfort if we were all able to come together and say, okay, we know that we want to present some ideas for change in the department to be inclusive to us. It's going to take all of us to do it, we think. And so we just began talking, and we really, how difficult it can be just being someone of color, of a different culture, how difficult it can be being in a Eurocentric environment. And our main goal, mission is not only to provide a space of comfort for members of the Black theater, but also to help make pathways for other people of color, other creators of color, and BIPOC, and also to help bring to light issues that might not be seen as issues, because as someone who is not in the and who is not BIPOC, there are things that can go unnoticed, like differences in hair design or lighting and such.
Yes, sorry, just to expand on what Alexandria is saying, essentially BTE is a culmination of the Black theatrical creators within the department in an effort to empower each other's voices and create opportunities as opposed to waiting for those opportunities to be given to us or handed to us. We took it into our own hands to create this collective of individuals who wanted to tell our stories on our own terms and with our own conditions. So that is essentially what BTA has become.
Well, let's take the story back to last March, April, and May. I'll set the stage a little bit for that. So, like many of you in the room right now, we got the news. We almost overnight translated our classrooms into an online experience with no training, no understanding. Spring break got very interesting fast, and translating theater, which if you had to watch a play on a screen, realizes how it doesn't always translate the best. That it's a living, breathing medium that often is meant to be in, has been described as great reckonings in small rooms, people collaborating together. And the students were quite interested in how can we make a project. Carlos and Alexandria, if you remember some of those early conversations, we talked about doing like live drive-in movies. We got a sternly written letter from Lucasfilm that their fan fiction films does not apply to live fan plays of Star Wars, where we're going to use toys, special effects, and some of the tricks that we do in our normal classes. But we were actually called to account with the murder of George Floyd and realizing that theater's job is not to distract, but rather hold a mirror up to nature. And our conversations quickly changed. Along with that conversation of not only what to do, Carlos and Alexandria initiated a conversation of how to do it. There was some intense like press releases going out from leading theaters from around the country. One of the preeminent training institutions, Yale, said we're going to take the full year off and not produce while we interrogate and audit our courses for social inequality. And I remember in that conversation, Carlos and Alexander, you both saying, we can't afford nor do we want to take a year off. How can people think that we are necessary and urgent if we want an entire year? We also had to try to find a way to do it safely. Let's start, Carlos. Let's start with you first. A little, like you were taking care of a grandparent. You had to really moderate your experience. Tell us a little bit about your experience of that time, and then maybe Alexandra, you could talk a little bit about how we landed on 20,000 Leagues, and then started to write this collaborative call to action.
Yes, as Matt mentioned, I was the primary caretaker for my grandmother who, as soon as coronavirus had hit, of course, I went into quarantine in order to not only protect my own health, but especially hers because she is high risk. And during that process, she had undergone numerous strokes, and we were in and out of the hospital, which in itself was the worst time possible. But during that process, a lot of self-discovery became prominent in my development. But aside from that, I'd say that when the George Floyd incident happened and when all of this social justice became a prominent topic, and we are finally talking about this thing that had been gone, ignored, and disregarded for so long. Um, we felt a genuine obligation to speak on it and to produce a production that would, uh, as Matt said, mirror our society's current experience and struggle. And we weren't going to allow coronavirus to stop us from doing that. In fact, we had an obligation to um, produce something regardless of the restrictions around safety, working around those parameters in order to fulfill our duty as theater makers while not um, neglecting that responsibility because of outside limitations.
um, at the beginning of the process, just while we were talking, and we had a few stories in the air that you're like, these could be really cool to adapt. And then, yeah, with the death of George Floyd, and it became very clear that we not only did we not have the time, but as theater makers, we did not have the I won't say the freedom, but we did not have the privilege of not saying anything. And so we, looking through the stories and reading through 20,000 Leagues, was like, this speaks a lot on social injustice. Um, and just, it's just so prevalent. And right now, we went through talking about it, and we would go through it, and we'd read it and reread it and reread it. It's like, does this truly feel like your narrative? Does this feel like our narrative? Does this feel how I feel about social injustice? Can people watch this and see that something is being done wrong, and it could very easily not be just be something that we show the world, we show our audience, they see that it's relevant. And 20,000 Leagues checked all of those boxes. And going into it, and a lot of what we have in the show is straight from the story, straight from the book, the novel, not only to just to show that these issues that were being talked about forever ago are still just so prevalent, and we didn't want to take that away. We wanted to make it clear that this is something that still matters. If this is still this big of an issue, it's a problem, and you need to see this. And we made, like, we want to keep a lot of this the same just to make that clear. And at one point we are toying around with the idea of showing, like, we want you to see that what we're saying is coming straight from this story, written forever ago. And we sat down, and there were a lot of parts where it was, is there any way we can condense this? And there was so much of it that was just so prevalent and so important. And at this point, we realized that it was definitely the show that we needed to do. And just writing it, like, okay, we want to make sure that everything that we have in here is, it's all got to mean something, not just as a theme, but everything that we say and do has to have a meaning, because eyes are on us now. They really are. People have gone to the arts for this time, and we need to make sure that we're saying something that means something all the time. We have to keep that attention on the fact that we're trying to say something that matters. And that played a really big part in how we kept the wording. And then safety was also a really big thing. We started the rehearsal process kind of online. We were all online, and like, okay, we'll meet, we'll discuss how we'll do this. We're going to make sure we're going to be safe, because there are two big issues that we're handling right now. And while one of them is social injustice, the other one is this virus that is just taking the lives of so many people. And we have to find a way to stay conscious about this issue, while also making sure that audiences can enjoy this because they know that we're safe. And it really important to make sure we forge those two to really make a collaborative piece with both of those ideas and values in mind.
Great, thanks, Alexandria. I want to talk a little bit about like the making of 20,000 Leagues and the writing and how and the decision to start with a play before you brought into like a call to action. But I want to go back just a little bit, like when remember back when 20,000 Leagues was brought into that first Zoom meeting, and my first thought was of the Disney movie with Michael Douglas and a drugged out Peter Lorre. My first thought was about how can a play written in 1875 by a French white guy be used. So there's part of me like wondering why this book and how could it speak to this now? And then there's also in our conversations, our co-curricular season here is so student focused that in the roundtables we had about season selection, you both were really honest. Like, Matt, we've done some cool plays, but we're only adapting a dead white guy. They do take cool targets. Maybe like we were aiming at trying to do some very different things, and then we hear something about taking these old books and rendering them strange. So I guess what is it? Is 20,000 Leagues more than just sharks and submarines? Is there something else more that brought you there? And then maybe a little bit of how that, like, what was the impulse to bring these hip hop songs in and blend it, and why is it an old book to hold accountable a whole audience? An old book from years ago hold an audience accountable to today, do you think?
I can go first just on unpacking that because I feel that there is a lot there. As far as the writing process, I feel that from adapting the book and incorporating the music and the hip hop and the black singers like Sam Cooke and whatnot was kind of, I feel, tying the dialogue and the story with this music was so important for the production because for the longest time African Americans have used music as a medium of expression and in a way to articulate our experience in society. So it just felt so right to incorporate that music into the production and to let the music speak for itself too. There are many moments in the production where if there's music, there's not necessarily other dialogue, rather motion and movement and imagery, because it speaks so much deeper and more authentically than anything our words could say. The undertones of the production itself, of course, is not about giant squids and submarines and whatnot. There's so much there culminated in the character of Captain Nemo and everything that he stands for. He or she is such a complex and deep character, and Alexandria did a really good job kind of building those layers in her performance that I'm sure she will speak to later. But especially with all the protests that were going on and are ongoing, and in some cases rioting, this deep sense of frustration and oppression and bitterness, resentment that I personally was experiencing at the time with the connotations of George Floyd and the fight for justice for his life. Felt so embodied by Captain Nemo in his decision to not only empower himself and other people of the oppressed, but rather his deep urge to fight back against the hegemony that had for so long taken and never given anything in return. And just kind of creating that discussion, not necessarily a discussion on his morality, but rather the feeling intent behind Captain Nemo was as a person. And for my part, representing Professor Aronnax, it's so important for kind of carrying the audience through this story, this experience aboard the Nautilus, and telling Captain Nemo's story as authentically and transparently as possible. Because again, all of this came from the book. None of this is inserted from us. And I think that is so important to stress because, as Alexandria said, this is still so prevalent in our society. Society that loves to um, belittle said experience or utilize their privilege to ignore the topic and say it's 2020, this isn't a thing anymore. Um, and so we felt a genuine obligation to tell the story in the way that we did, and I'm sure Alexandria can expand upon that.
I think with 20,000 Leagues, we really wanted to, we have a call to action, and we really wanted to, because in this call to action, we say how we'd like to, just things that we feel like the department, we feel like could be worked with us to make this a more inclusive curriculum and environment. And another really big things about 20 Leagues was that we wanted to show that we're asking for student devised pieces or pieces where we can use the voices or work BIPOC creators. We can use some of our funds to infuse in our work. We wanted to show that we are asking for this kind of risk taking in our theater making in the department that we can do. We didn't want to leave any room to be able to say that this was something that wasn't really possible or that it was idealistic. And so before we told, we wanted to be able to show that this is something that can happen and that can be done. Because we are a pretty inclusive department just in even being able to perform in shows, which was a liberty I did not have. But I think that we wanted to show that we do have practical ways to charge the things that we're asking for, not only with shows, but also like how these things and how this thinking can go into our curriculum, with being able to work with pieces by BIPOC creators or in all of the classes that we provide. We wanted to lay the foundation and show that we could make this less of a Eurocentric centered space, and we will show you that this can happen and that this can be done, so that when we ask you to help us do this, the reason to say no can't. If there is a reason to say no, then will not be. It can't be done.
Wonderful. Thank you for your thoughts. In this regard, the coronavirus has brought us a time of great innovation as well as real reckoning and accountability to social justice and inequality. And in this, in your cohort across the board, you all created 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. There's 2 radio plays going on, another student play that's like might be radio, might be videotape, and this is all student work, and this is quite becoming a hallmark of the department. As you are transitioning and recovering from all this practical articulation of your aims and hopes and moving into a collaborative discussion of what's next, we only have 5 to 10 minutes left before we go into some questions. I know you have to get to class here soon as well. As we move into this collaborative discussion, where are the spaces in the department where you feel will be effective bridgeheads to this, or what are the obstacles that you're potentially facing that you experienced in 20,000 Leagues? Like, to recap, the whole university was under significant financial constraints. So we created together an effective and ethical budget model using outside structure. We've had some pretty intense conversations on the ethics of how to enfranchise and equip voices, particularly when you have a cisgendered straight white male instructor, each majority of your performance in directing classes. What is your hope and invitation as we come forward to start talking about what we must do, what we must do better, what we can and should do better?
I'll go first. Just as far as just reiterating what Matt said, absolutely, I think that our department has done an amazing job at mobilizing our resources in the most creative and effective way possible to benefit our student body. I think personally, as a member of the BIPOC community, I'd say that the best way to counteract this imbalance of like you said, only being taught by you, for example, is really focusing on exposure, more and more exposure. I think would be the primary motive for allowing the department to be that much more inclusive and collaborative. Not that we aren't already pushing in that direction, but I think that we could push further in said direction. Some practical ways of doing so. And before introducing those practical ideas, I kind of do want to emphasize that it's less about the literal proposition and more about the intent behind it, and working for a way to achieve our overall collective goal of making our department more inclusive and empowering for all voices, not just those that the world already caters to. And one of which ways being exposure to new voices and other creators and instructors, not necessarily to bring on new faculty members, but rather to provide opportunities for us to interact with people outside of what we encounter on a regular basis. For example, when coronavirus first hit, we were taking a Shakespeare course, and through outside funding, we were able to interact with Tony Award winners and directors and people in the field who are doing things and come from all kinds of backgrounds and different genders and races and cultures, and communicating with them and coaching with them in relation to the Shakespeare course benefited me as a student so much, because not only did it broaden my perception of this theatrical world, but rather it also worked to sharpen and hone my own personal methodology as a theater maker, because of the introduction of these new voices and perspectives and this unspoken understanding that I was able to pull from certain individuals. I think that is priceless. What I learned in that process benefited me so much more than what I could learn strictly within our department alone by itself. And in culmination with that, it was so beneficial for me as a student. I think maintaining that type of exposure in some capacity, I'm not entirely sure how. That's one of the questions that I would have for you, is how we can be creative and resourceful about our funding or our resources to provide opportunities for maybe guest speakers to speak on certain things, or I'm sure Alexandria will probably talk to introducing more criteria, more inclusive material into our curriculum, but that personally would be my first proposition for how we could move forward at this point.
Great. I'll answer that question in a minute. We'll listen to Alexandria, and then we'll pivot into some questions here. So I'll answer that question, and then let you answer any questions from the group. Alexandria.
As far as practical ways that I feel like we could move forward in being more inclusive in the department. I think that there are many ways that we could start. Like, I know, rather than focus on purely Eurocentric plays or purely male plays, kind of like for Fundamentals of Design, Stephen is doing a play by a woman, and it's a pretty open play. And I know that when I was in directing, we did Mud by Maria Irene Fornes. She's a woman of color. I think that those are great steps to moving forward. I think there are other aspects too that I think that we could try to work with. Like, I think we're doing good with including women or BIPOC playwrights within curriculum. I think that also making sure that we is working on including keeping BIPOC in mind with other courses as well, such as lighting or costuming. Like coming across the issue of not knowing what to do with the hair of Black actors or colors that wash Black actors out, and it's not something that we can really be upset about, because if it's not something that you really know, how you can't know what's wrong. But we do want to be here and say there is a way that we have to go about this, and it's perfectly fine because there was no knowledge of it before, but we wanted that there can be, and so that BIPOC performers or theater makers aren't running across these issues where, this light here, this color light, or this color costume completely is me out. Me and another actor who was not of color are wearing it, and like, okay, this is fine. And it's things like that aren't even really thought of, but it's a Eurocentric way of thinking, and it can be. I think we're doing a great job of moving forward, but I think that even things like that of making sure that I think it's important for us to know that the best way forward is to keep it in mind. I think that the first step in advancing, I think that we're doing very good at taking it, but I do think that that could be another step that we could do to make it even more inclusive, so that these issues are not ones that are run into so often.
Thank you, Alexandria. So we have just probably 3 to 5 short minutes before we have to let you all go. But in answering your question, Carlos, the success of that moment was of bringing those in, and their response to you, our students, both through that experience and then working with both of you through the Tennessee Williams Festival and Clarksville, Mississippi. I think that we have lots of interesting avenues by seeking outside funding that can really support this, and particularly in the arts. I think Dean Gilbert will get frustrated with me because I always say, "Oh, we can do it. We can do more with less," because that's not a really good academic model. But we're good at that in the theater. We can do more with $100 than most people can do with 10,000. That said, we're finding ways to make sure that people are ethically and equitably compensated for their work. We use our in-kind resources here at the university to offset budgets that are paid for. Like, we used an Arts Commission grant to commission BIPOC artists to, since there are very few, if any, Black scenic designers, costume designers, lighting designers in the community, commission those who have visual literacies in other arts, help build the capacity there. I think one of the real strategies that we can do is, because of our public access and open nature of our co-curricular program, that everyone can audition and participate, rather than allowing this to be like a glorified community theater, to make sure that we're increasing the capacity of our underserved high schools and people not getting opportunities, so that we can open space without presumption or assumption. And the biggest thing is within the American theater, there's a persistent cult of personality around actor training, and I think the independence and even honoriness of your cohort as a total, and you two beloved students in particular, of like so independent, is that both the greatest joy but also greatest responsibility of teachers is to be rendered obsolete by their students. And so as we're doing this, particularly within the theater, where academic institutions have so long been not only the incubator but the great protector of theatrical cliches and unexamined conventions, that anything of the past few months has taught us that it's time for not only radical reinvention, radical innovation, and maybe even like radical hospitality and empathy. So a lot of these experiences is trying to find a way to protect you at all costs in your education, if that makes sense. And that's not to say that we're not trying to give you the greatest education, but actually try to make sure that you have the creative, imaginative, and intellectual rocket fuel to truly launch. Theater is so much about the now, and as your collaborator and my understanding of today is finite. Pretty soon it's going to be very tempered by my understanding of yesterday, and I'll be on my theatrical poach. In my day, we dropped paper from the ceiling, like whatever cliche we're doing right now. Just have a few short minutes, so if you have a question, feel free to use it in the chat. But I want to give just a few information that soon 20,000 Leagues is available to view at any time, but there'll be a concerted effort to roll this out. It was produced in part by Toledo Arts Commission and their Momentum Festival. In the coming weeks and months, we're struggling a little bit to keep above water, Carlos and Alexandria and I, but there's a really eloquent document that talks and catalyzes meaningful conversation that reflects the conversation that is happening in classes across our campus, and definitely in the classes over here in the Center for Performing Arts. But as we wrap up, it doesn't seem keep posted for that information, and if there's any other questions, most importantly, Carlos and Alexandria. I'm speaking for myself, but I don't think it's for my colleagues and our friends, particularly because our department is so much of a teaching learning ensemble. So I'm speaking for myself. I'm with you. We must do better. I'm sorry it's taken so long. I'm sorry for what we've done and failed to do. We have been working, and there's work to do, and you're not alone, and you are so valued. I can't wait to see what we do next, but even more importantly, what you'll be doing next. We're so grateful for your courage, your thinking, and your hard work, and for your really, really wonderful play.
Thank you.
That is well said. Thank you, Dr. Foss. And thank you both, Alexandria and Carlos. I do have a question or two in chat. First, I just want to say, Alexandria and Carlos, I'm humbled. Look what you're accomplishing. You're not even out of your bachelor's program yet. And look what you're doing. And look at how well you're able to analyze the work environment, the industry that you are a part of, and understand the situation, to grasp the moment. That to me is outstanding. I think Chicago and New York better look out, because they got some great talent coming their way. Some great minds. Also, Dr. Foss, I applaud you for helping your students to empower themselves. We really need more faculty like you. So I just wanted to say that real quick. But I do have a question in the chat. Also, there is a link to a Vimeo video posted. That's it, right?
Yeah, that's the correct video, and then the link on the Vimeo, and then there'll be a more formal rollout here, I think, in the next few weeks, where people can purchase tickets and look at things look at the play in a more formal way. But they could definitely. We're really committed. One of the benefits of this time is to go full public access, where we can remove the economic barriers, and I think that's something we're very interested in. And we do believe that it's a sustainable economic model. I know it sounds a little more like Field of Dreams. If we build it, people will come. But when we took All Quiet on the Western Front of Chicago, it was a hit play, and no one ever had to pay for a ticket. And and it all worked out really, really well. And so we really believe in public access. We know that it's not quite NPR in terms of model, but it's not too far off from what Shakespeare and the Groundlings were trying to do. Not to privilege Shakespeare, but there was a time when people loved to go see plays.
That is. Now, there's a couple comments in the I just want to read them in case you guys didn't see them. One says, "Thank you for the initiative you are taking, and I absolutely cannot wait to watch your work and be in touch in the future." Another one says, "I am looking forward to watching your play. I think you will help us remove systemic racism from the arts." Now, also, there's a link posted, blackandbrowntheater.org, and it says, "I'm dropping this into the chat as I wanted to know if you have been in touch with the Black and Brown Theater in Detroit, given that you are articulating a fantastic vision of how we can use resources we have without focusing on hiring more faculty." So are you linking with creative workers already out there, such as in Detroit?
Yeah, we've been working with a lot of artists more on a national scale. Alexandria and Carlos worked a whole professional ensemble for the Mississippi Delta Tennessee Williams Festival, and many of them were coaches for their Shakespeare classes or their acting work during COVID. It's interesting that everyone's treading water, that we've had more success with individuals rather than existing institutions right now. But that bridge building is definitely there. And I got my PhD at Wayne State and is familiar with Black and Brown Theater and some of the other companies there. And that's one of the strong things that goes on in this department, is that the students are thrust often into very professional experiences right away. Alexandria and Carlos are over at the Simulation Center quite often. They got very little guidance. They were just told, "You're working on Summer and Smoke, and here's a director from LA and a diverse cast, and you're going to figure it out, and we'll see you later." Carlos, go ahead.
Yeah, and just especially in regards to 20,000 Leagues, as far as the distribution of responsibility that we were given, as far as my own agency when it came to Professor Aaron X's staging in the puppet, bringing the puppet to life, Nedland, and as far as my participation in the more visual etudes that we incorporated into the production, that was handled by other members of the ensemble who were helping to put together this production. And Alexandria, for her part, she wants to speak to it. But it really allowed me to take more agency over who I am as a creator, and opportunities like those are paramount to my development as a student and as a young professional moving forward.
Well said. Oh, I'm sorry, Alexandria, go ahead.
And I was just gonna say, working on the choreography of the show, I know that being kind of put into that situation and getting to help with those directorial directions and such was very, I think it was very helpful in realizing how to, not only it was helpful in being put in that kind of adult creator situation, but just moving forward how we are, it was very helpful to be able to, it wasn't the first time I've choreographed a piece to be put on at UT, but it was the first time I really felt able to put any of my genuine culture in the piece, which was very liberating and also a little scary, which I think was great with this show. It was evident we were moving forward. It felt a little like I was flying out of the nest for the first time, getting to really bring some of my culture into a piece that was about my culture in a way. And so that was very interesting, and it was having that kind of fear and feeling of liberation was incredible to have, especially still as a student for me.
I know that takes us right up against the time. We've gone even a little longer than we anticipated. Alexandria and Carlos, I know you have work in class soon. Dwight, you so much for organizing this. If there's people have further questions, feel free to reach out. My email is matthew.foss@utoledo.edu, and I can get you connected. These two wonderful people. And Dwight, you're right. Look out for what they have next. And I can't wait to our next conversations, you two. Thanks so much for being here today.